Okay, and welcome to the first episode of the Drunken Dialectics Podcast. I'm Brandon.
I'm Devin.
I'm Payne.
And let's take a quick shot to get us rolling here. Ready, Devin?
You already know it's Drunken Dialectics.
Of
we
course.
got to.
We have to. That's the rules.
1, 2, 3.
Okay. And tonight we are
nice
drinking.
little shot of vodka.
Tonight it is Thanksgiving. The liquor stores are closed, so we're drinking the last of my Tavarsky, which
We are.
is not an easy
It
thing
is
to
an
take down.
experience.
It is very much an experience. So what this is three people coming together with fairly different points of views. Occasionally four.
Maybe we may have guests.
It's entirely possible. Who knows where this takes us?
We'll talk about that a little bit.
But the main crux of this podcast will be, I am a fairly far right person, and Devin here, go ahead.
I'm very far left. I'm very, very left libertarian. I'm in the bottom left corner if you go by the compass.
Very bottom, very left. And then Payne, go ahead and kind of say where you're at here.
I mean, I'm not really anywhere. I'm kind of developing my views, but I did take the test. I'm, leftist authoritarian, so.
Oh shit!
Yeah,
I'm
no, what's
I'm up there.
I didn't. He's very barely authoritarian.
Yeah,
What's
I'm
funny
not-
is I'm also very barely authoritarian. So we'll actually have these on the screen whenever we put this up. So
We also
whenever
have one more person who,
whenever our fourth
did
person
take
is
the test.
whenever our fourth person is here, we actually have a representative from every quadrant of the political compass.
And when our fourth person is here, we are actually financially obligated to say taxation is theft at least 4 times per podcast.
To an
Sorry,
extent, it
Mitchell.
is. I'm actually okay. So I'll go ahead and start real quick. So
All right. Yeah.
I
Brandon,
am-
start with your description of what you think you are and what your political ideas are.
what I think I am, I don't know what you're
I think
implying.
no.
there,
I
Devin.
think I don't mean that in a demeaning way. I think what people think they are personally is very much more important than what other people say they are.
Okay, I see what you're saying there. Okay,
As
so
far as I do.
real quick, let's kind of explain what we're doing here. So, me and my friend Devin here, we've had we had a series of extensive conversations. in
Very
which,
deep.
deep enough.
Yeah,
I would say
outside it was cold.
it was very
But
well.
we
It
still did it.
only recently became cold,
But the last one, at the very least,
the last one was very cold. But where we come to things from very different points of view, and it led to some very good conversations, very civil conversations.
Yeah,
The kind of conversations that it's kind of hard to find nowadays between different viewpoints.
And I think there's a couple reasons for that. I think if you're in a position where you can have a civil conversation, you should.
I agree. Yes.
I think there are a lot of people who politically are in a situation where maybe discussing things civilly and just politely maybe isn't the circumstance that they themselves are in. I understand that. And we'll talk about that more at some point, I'm sure. But I think that if you are a person who is lucky enough, I feel like lucky is a even enough term.
Yeah, I think so.
If you're a person who's lucky enough to be in a position where you can discuss, politics and ideology, politely and without problem, and you can actually talk about it, then you should. You should always discuss things when you have the option to. I understand, you boy a leftist. I understand that there are people out there who are very personally influenced by politics and that they can't personally... That discussion is very much a more personal public matter for them that... Go ahead.
I think that's understandable too, to an extent, because a lot of times what's happening in these conversations is your deepest views are being challenged in a certain way. Like the foundation for what you think the appropriate way to live life is being challenged. That's very much the foundation of who you are as a person. I think it's understandable for people to react in a hostile manner to those
Of course.
to those challenges. But the problem is, I think I think it's important to overcome that initial anger and defensiveness almost. I think it's important to step outside of your ideology and not who you are as a person isn't necessarily what you believe politically or well, it is, but it's more than that. It's how you act in a way.
I understand.
What you should be able to have your assumptions challenged is I think what I'm getting at. Because that's how you grow as a person. I understand why it's very difficult, but it's important at the same time, I think, to allow yourself to be challenged in that way. And that's what we're doing here, I think.
Right. And I think a very important thing to consider, what I was getting at earlier with, like, this podcast in general, for the most part at least, will be, just very friendly, back and forth, discussion of ideas. It's not going to be like a hardcore debate. We will comment and question each other's beliefs as we have done thus far, because as Brandon said, we do have that this was built upon me and him just discussing ideas back and forth, and we realized we were going very in depth about it. We thought maybe some other people who are around where we are on their terms of like figuring out their ideological and political beliefs, maybe hearing a discussion would help them to think about some things. And what I'm getting at mostly is that, like, I understand that there are people who politics influence their, like, standard of living and their daily life. And I understand why people where politics are very, very close at hand maybe would be more hard and fast on certain ideas and certain conversations. I understand that. This podcast in general is more for the people who, and there are a lot of you out there, I promise you this, there are a lot of you out there, I promise you this, who you look at politics and you're interested in it, but it kind of comes across as a passing hobby, or it's something that doesn't affect you directly. I think that politics and the discussion of politics, particularly among the group of people who you don't see everyday effects from politics, I think it's important to discuss what politics mean, what ideas mean, and where exactly you are coming from ideologically.
It's kind of that old adage where you don't have to care about government, but government's going to care about you. It's whether you think.
Unless they don't.
Well, okay. It's going to affect you whether you think it does or not. I think is the important.
Are we posting the political compass results?
Yes, we. Okay.
Okay.
Let's get right into that. Actually,
I feel like that explains much more deeply what I just said than anything else I could say.
I could see that. So again, so let's go over the name real quick because I think the name says a lot.
That's
Drunken Dialectics. We have pre-gamed a little bit before this podcast.
You're goddamn right.
We have, yes. And we are going to be drinking. Well, we're kind of running low tonight. Once again, it's Thanksgiving. The liquor stores are closed. We have what we have, but we are going to be drinking throughout these, and we're going to be having just conversations where they're lighthearted. And again, it's a dialectic. Drunken Dialectics.
It could get deeper at times. Mm-hmm. But the focus I feel like is going to be in general. This first one is more of just a general introduction, but after that, the focus I feel like will be more on the subject, and at times the subject itself and people's opinion or feelings on the subject may get deeper. But in general, what you need to know is we're all friends here. We are discussing things. We're putting our ideas forward. We are putting them up against each other. But it's not, except for in some cases, which I'm sure we'll get into them, and that's fine. In general, it's more a discussion than a debate. We put our ideas forward and compare and contrast them. We may debate at some point, and that's okay.
I think debate's the wrong word. I think a dialectic is what we're having here. It's again, I think that's why the name is important. Drunken Dialectics.
Yeah, no.
A dialectic is,
It is
in general, it's two people from different views trying to come to either. I think the truth is basically what we're trying to arrive at. We're trying to arrive at the truth.
I think the truth is a fair medium.
Mm-hmm.
I think now there are cases, and I'm not going to bring it up.
But the main point really is.
But the point is to get two very opposing ideals, two very opposing viewpoints, get what we're saying, what we're trying to convey, and then the listener, whoever you are, you can draw your own opinion.
Exactly.
You can look at what we're saying, and if any of it resonates with you, if any of it comes across to you as something that is factual, then you take that down, you consider it, you think about it, and then I would suggest that if you're in a position to do so, that you consider the opposing viewpoint and why they believe what they believe. I think the why is the real question that we'll get into with this podcast. The why of why do you believe that? Why do you think that works this way? I think why is really what we're getting at with this.
I completely agree. So I think debate is what I'm really trying to get at is this isn't a debate. We're not trying to one up each other. We're not trying to catch each other in bad arguments. A lot of the time
I feel like if I may interrupt very briefly, I feel like that's a little unfair to debate. Although I understand where you're coming from, I feel like just debate in modern times has been reduced to mudslinging on like a very personal level. And I think debate in and of itself of talking about ideals and how they line up with greater ideas and how those compare and contrast and asking each other, so is this what you think? Which I think we do a lot as far as just our general conversations. I think we may get into debate, but it isn't necessarily the debate you think of in the year of our Lord 2018 that you might think of, where debate in the modern era for some reason has come down to personal attacks. And I mean, I say for some reason, I know very well why it's come down to personal attacks, but at the same time, you can personally attack someone for things they have done. That's fine. If things they have done come across as very, very antagonistic to your beliefs, okay. But I think the main thing to focus on in general, first and foremost, is beliefs. Beliefs are very important, and I think that's the crux of this podcast, is discussing the importance of beliefs and why people believe those beliefs and the effect those beliefs have on people's lives and how those beliefs affect how they generate other beliefs.
No, I think that's right. I think that's right. And one thing I think you'll find, and this is one last point before we get into kind of an introduction of who we are, what we believe in general, since this is the introductory podcast. So the main thing is we're not going to be discussing policy very often. It'll come up every once in a while. The main
Fiscal policy, like direct policy.
Yes.
I feel
like a specific bill or something.
General ideas towards policy.
But even then, we're going to be discussing kind of the underlying ideas of the policy, not necessarily the policy itself in general.
We may, at some point we may come into more specific ideas, but in general, this is very, very, this is a podcast that focuses upon the discussion of ideals, the base point, if you will, on where a lot of people start, on where they're coming from, and why they start on that point, and what they believe. And I think that's very important in the political climate.
I agree. So let's get right into it. So
all right.
And we are all new to this, so If the audio is a little bit touchy, we'll try to work on that. It's going to be a growing process, and we hope that if you're listening, you'll help us out with that. Like, tell us what we're doing wrong.
Tell us when we fuck up.
Exactly. If we make a bad argument that we don't catch in the moment, then feel free to post a comment about it. We will pay attention.
If you can't hear us when
Yes.
we're discussing something, please tell us in the moment.
If there's
because
20
Jesus
minutes
Christ.
of silence, then we would like to know. So I'll start us out. You'll see the political compass when we post it in the video. I am fairly right, and very, very slightly authoritarian. So I, in general, believe in. I think the founding fathers had it correct in almost every way. The right to, I believe in fundamental human rights given by God or even natural rights, if you want to take God out of it.
I don't mean to cut in on the initial introduction podcast, but I feel like it's very important because it's the basis. What are those fundamental rights?
Oh, don't worry, I was going to get there.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
life,
I just want to make sure that we were getting there.
the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness / property, whichever one you want to use
We
specifically.
will argue extensively about that last one.
Yeah, I feel like from arguing
That
the
last one is mostly what our arguments are, generally.
So, I think the United States of America is the greatest country that's ever existed. I think the Constitution in general is correct. I think most of the problems we have today stem from basically altering the Constitution in a way that's antithetical might be the wrong word, but goes against the principles of the original Constitution. I think a lot of the problems today come from that. I think if we were to go back to just strict fundamental constitutionalism, we would be in a very good situation where most problems we have today would not exist. I think that's a very good general sum up of my views. Is constitutional.
The U.S. Constitution.
Yes, the U.S. Constitution is I think in general correct, and I think it's the best political document we have.
And why is that? On a person, this is not. I want to push this forward to anybody who might listen to this podcast. When I ask why, I'm asking on a very personal level why Brandon as a person believes this. I'm not asking for like this big in-depth like political fucking deluge of information. This is going to be a very personal podcast, and if you have I'm sorry, this may not be the exact time to voice this, but if you have questions or concerns or critiques, even we're down for critiques.
Oh, we love them.
Absolutely,
Please.
Of particular podcast members' viewpoints, just let us know. Ask us some questions, and they can be as in depth as you want. If somebody out there cares enough to ask some questions, we'll definitely answer them. But I think the important thing to get at with what I'm saying right now is this is when we refer to things, we are referring to things unless we express differently on a very personal. This is a personal viewpoint, and
I see what you're saying. We're not going to be arguing. Cut and paste argument.
We're not arguing for a general political viewpoint. Like, you may have your general ideas that you believe with, and I have my general ideas that I believe in. But I feel like both of us go a little bit off the beaten path on that.
Yes, I'm not a.
You're not the generally what people think of as especially you're not what people think of as a right authoritarian, for sure.
I'm very barely authoritarian,
and
we will get into the problems that I think we both have problems with the political compass test. So we'll get into that at some point.
We may have a full discussion on that.
Oh, I'm sure we will. But
we may get mentioned here for that. But because he's our potential fourth.
Yes.
And he also is the person who has voiced the most complaints with the political compass.
Okay, so why do I think the Constitution is the best political document we have?
That's what I think is the why is the most important question we can ask. Because why is really what we're discussing in this podcast.
I'll give
right?
a quick why, but I want to keep it rolling. So after I give my why.
It's a basic description. We'll get into it more later, but I just wanted to hit you with that question now.
So
we're used to it.
I am a pragmatist, and I have to look at the United States through history. And yes, we've had plenty of problems. Slavery was a terrible thing. The racism of America was a very terrible thing. I'm not trying to say that we were always perfect, but I do believe that the United States has been and is the greatest entity for good. The greatest state that is a entity that is the embodiment of striving towards the good that we have seen through history. I have to look at the overall impact we've had on the world, and we've had some things that have gone badly. I cannot argue that. I'm not trying to say we're perfect. But in general, I think we've been a force for good much more than we've been a force for bad. And the ratio of our good to bad is much better than the rest of the world. And I do think that stems from the founding principles that started this nation. So if you have another specific question, I'd like to answer it. But that's a general.
I think you basically covered everything. I feel like the most important questions on political ideology, and this goes even further than all the concessions I've made thus far. Of I understand there are people who politics affect more directly than me. This is very direct. I feel like the what of politics, what do you believe, is very important. The how. The how may or may not be the second or third, depending on how you interpret it. I feel like the how is very much the how do you take your beliefs and put them forward in a political context that is discernible and understandable. But beyond that, you also have the why. And I think why may be a better second step than a third. But
I think so, yes.
Why? I do feel like it's the most important step, though. Why do you believe a certain thing? And you've put some very, very interesting and very good ideas out. But why would you say, as a person, that you believe those ideas? What in particular makes you look at those ideas and go, "This is what I believe"?
Okay, so why do I believe that the United States is the best?
Right. Well,
okay.
What about it makes you believe that?
Okay, so there are certain ideas that have, for in large part, at least, if you consider successful countries, have only existed in the United States. The idea of freedom of speech, the idea of a right to your own property, and the right to bear arms. A lot of these come together only in the United States. And I would pose as an argument to what I think you're getting at is, so we're the superpower of the world. There's only one superpower that exists right now.
I do want to put it forward. I'm not yet getting at anything. I will very much be getting at things later, but what I'm getting at right now is just I very much want I don't know. I feel like a full explanation. And if you wanna hit me with the same questions, I'm very much down for that. I just want I feel like the what, how, and why are the very, very most important questions of.
So I think to answer that, I think the main thing we're getting at here is why do I think the United States is the best country? Okay. So again, I would say real quick that
the why and the what, as far as what about the U.S. is important to you.
Well, I would say that our Bill of Rights and our Constitution, or having a written Constitution like that.
Right.
Britain does not have one, and they don't have a Bill of Rights.
Well,
there's certain things that they have an unwritten Constitution.
They also have the Magna Carta and things like that.
Yes, yes, but that's not a constitution. It all adds together.
It's not verbatim a constitution.
And they don't have freedom of speech. They don't have the right to bear arms. They don't have these things. And I would say Britain is probably the second most free country that at least follows our ideals. And even then, I think they're very much lacking.
I am taking a lot of effort to not mention Ireland right now.
I don't know enough about Ireland. That might be fair, but they're not a superpower. They're not a powerful nation.
Of course. If we're talking about major world powers.
Yes, I am talking about major world powers. Okay.
Sure thing.
And I think, okay, so, and again, the United States is the single superpower that actually really has an active force in the world right now. Would you agree to that?
I think for the past 10 to 15 years...
China's coming.
I would say for the past 10 to 15 years, America has been the sole superpower. They got that right in the Cold War. They became the sole superpower of the world. They influenced the world on a level that no other country does. In the past, I would say 5 to 10 years, you have China, who very much is influencing the world, though through a different...
But on the level of the United States.
Through a different angle. But I do feel like there's a consideration that Chinese thought may come to influence the world in a stronger way.
They're rising. But my main point, my main point stands.
And in a more indirect way, I do feel like the Russians still do have some kind of influence on.
I'm not saying no one else influences
certain thought, but at the moment, yes, the U.S. is the sole superpower by the definition of what we currently have as a superpower.
Okay. And my question would be to anybody who thinks I'm wrong about this would be, in terms of the United States being the best country in the world, who would you rather have be that? If you could replace the United States as a sole superpower, who would you rather have doing it? I don't think there's a good alternative to the United States.
I'll approach that later.
Okay, but that's my main point.
That's not this. We're talking about our personal beliefs right now. So
yes, okay, but that sums up mine fair enough. So I'll let you go ahead.
I start saying this is just an appendum to yours. That anybody who's hearing this, who may be listening to this, who thinks, "Hey, I have all these examples." This is the very first podcast we have. This is just meant to be an expression of initial beliefs. Honestly, I would not be surprised if all of us shift our beliefs at least a bit over the time period of this podcast. So if you have a point to point forward or a point of conjecture to point forward, by all means, if you happen to listen to this and you have thoughts about it, post it in the comments of wherever we're posting this. And let us know, and we'll address those by all means. I feel like we all, at least, we will definitely. Any comments or concerns or questions, we will address. If you're someone who, gives enough of a shit about this podcast to listen to it, we will answer your questions.
Okay, so what are your primary beliefs?
All right. My name's Devin. I am very much a leftist. I am very much, for fear of veering into terms that have had very shifting ideologies over the past 50 years even, I'm what one might consider a left libertarian. In general, my beliefs are, the most important, I feel like, of my beliefs are that I am opposed to unjust authority. I oppose any authority that I think personally is unjust. I think that statism in general, the allegiance to a state, the idea that the state has influence and authority over the people, I think that's unjust. I think the states should serve the people. And also, I am, in general, I think I'm very anti-capitalistic. I don't agree with any of the ideas of capitalism. I don't agree with the execution of capitalism as we have seen it. That's not to say that I think capitalism is completely without merit. I don't. I do think it does have its merits. I do think it does have its positives and negatives. I think the negatives greatly outweigh the positives, but I do think capitalism has the potential to provide some good for the world. In general, I am, I feel like I'm very, focus towards equality in general amongst people and recognize...
Equality of outcome or equality of opportunity?
How do you mean?
Okay.
I feel like that's the thing. A lot of people would put those questions forward as absolutes, and I don't think they are. So, what do you mean? Opportunity of outcome or opportunity of opportunity?
You mean equality of outcome or equality of opportunity?
Yeah, equality of... Yeah, I'm sorry.
So I would say equality of opportunity would be that legally, under the law, everybody has the same ability to exercise their influence over society as any other given person under the law. Now, there is no such thing as true equality, in my opinion, in which case, I mean, someone who's 6'5" is going to be better basketball player than I am. There's nothing we can really do about that, right? So that's not equal.
Damn good.
Exactly. So that's not equal in terms of outcome, but you're both legally able to play basketball.
Right.
Okay, so equality of outcome would be strapping weights on that guy's legs so he can't jump as high as I can. That's how I view it.
I think that the way you're putting that forward may be a little biased and maybe a little extreme.
That's fair. It probably is.
If I may put what I mean by equality out there.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I think in general, the idea of equality is that every human in a society, in accordance to the rules and regulations and ideas of that society, starts at the same point. Now, from that point, you may go wildly different directions. And in some cases, you may cause problems, you may fuck up, you may be counterproductive to society in general as a person. But I think in general, everyone should have the opportunity to find and realize what they are good at, what they are driven towards, mentally, and to be able to focus on that and influence society through that viewpoint. I think that the problem that I have with capitalism and equality in particular is that capitalism tends to push those who are at a lower economical stratus, people who function on a level that is lower than middle class. I feel like people who are lower class tend to not have the chances that people who are above that position have, and I think that is a problem with capitalism. I think there are lots of problems with capitalism, but in reference to this question, I think the problem in general with capitalism is that it is very, very much it does not encourage equal representation amongst peoples. I think that capitalism outright encourages unequal representation amongst people, and that it leans towards people who already have greater wealth.
I think this is a perfect thing for us to jump into on the first podcast. So let's let Payne go ahead and introduce himself real quick, and we'll jump right back into this. Payne, go ahead.
All right, I'm Payne. I'm developing my views right now. I'm young, so I really have any strong viewpoints on really anything. Right now I'm just kind of the mediator here, just trying to get them on, the same point, get them talking about, kind of the same thing, and get their terms right, get everything correct, because it is drunken dialectics, so they are going to be drunk, and I am sober the whole time, so that's good.
We have a tendency to very much go off on tangents, and then
veer very hard,
and then go on tangents of the tangent to the point where we're no longer anywhere near our original point. So he's here to keep us on.
If we ever do that, and you want to be the person who tries to argue a way to tie that back, I appreciate you personally.
It works out. Sometimes it works out, but sometimes it does not at all. So he's going to try to keep us near there.
Payne, I would put forward, do you really not have any basic ideas? Do you what would you say as a person are your very like baseline ideas on what is right and wrong.
Yeah, how to
what
live
is-
life. I think that's what a lot of it comes down to.
Yeah.
What is the correct way to live life?
You did you did the political compass, right?
Yeah.
First, where'd you come out on that?
Leftist authoritarian. And I don't know if that's
Well,
accurate or not. I mean,
To clarify,
I mean-
he was a little bit. He was like probably 3 out of 10 left and like 0.5 out of
Right.
10 authoritarian. He wasn't that high authoritarian.
I mean, I have viewpoints, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, nothing arguable.
No, I think even if your perspective is very, very
Vague.
not even vague, just very, open to the other sides.
Right.
I think where you're coming from right now is kind of important. What like if you had to pin down your beliefs, what would you say they are on things you're sure of, or things you think you're sure of? At
Yes,
least?
yeah, that's a good way to do it.
I've been focusing a lot on social interaction, and that's something very different from what we're talking about. So it's not really.
I don't think it is.
It ties in.
No, I don't think it is.
I mean, I've been focusing on human behavior in social interaction. That's. I mean, it's not really political or philosophical.
It ties into both of those things, though.
yeah. It's
very much.
It's sociology, basically. Which I mean,
Okay.
I've been very interested in it, and I've been kind of just observing people pretty much around me. I mean, even you guys. I've been watching you guys very closely.
You been what?
I mean, so I've been thinking a lot
Even
about
more
that.
pain.
And my main, I don't know.
CIA
This is
plan?
going to be random, and this isn't going to be tied into what we're talking about. But my main strong belief is that, and this might not tie into anything.
It's fine. Go ahead.
Okay,
Say it.
is that the raising of children
Okay.
in any society, in any situation, is the most important thing. Because I strongly believe that if we were to raise our children correctly and to socially, and to get them socially stable, I mean, that might not be the correct words, but to get them socially,
Developed?
yes, kind of developed and to where they can function properly.
In society.
Yes. I feel like that's the most important thing. I think that, I've seen it. I think if you've grown up in I think if parents are in a screwed up situation, they can still raise they can still raise their children, relatively well to where they can function properly in society. I think that's the most important thing we should teach.
Regardless of anything else, that's the one thing that is most important. Regardless of any other circumstances, no matter what the situation in the family is, you think that that's what should be focused on.
I don't think it's focused on enough. I think when there's like a person, an individual that's done some very bad things, I think when that person's looked at, they think that person is bad and they've done.
They're bad because they're bad.
Well, yes, and that's
they're
fine.
bad because the
Like
reasons.
they should be looked down upon because
Yeah, of
they've made
course.
bad
If you
decisions
do
when they
horrible
know.
things,
Yeah,
you did horrible
yeah,
things.
but I think there's another factor that they weren't raised correctly, and I think it's like, what the hell, I mean, I'm sorry. Like I think very strongly about this because like, I mean,
That's a good viewpoint.
I think it's
I think he's correct. Yeah.
I think it's very, very like crazy how it's not viewed that like if you raise a child correctly, they will grow up to have a very happy life.
Okay, so Payne, 2020, imprison mothers of serial killers. I think is what he's getting. That's a joke. That's a joke. No, but I agree. I think the children are, to quote the cliche, the children are our future, and you have a responsibility as a parent to raise them a certain way. I completely agree with
that
that.
children are our future is very important. I think even more than that, I don't know whether this is more important or not, but the children are the future.
Oh, yes, I think that's right. Yes. So I think, but
Even beyond, and in some cases, I definitely think that's a good viewpoint.
I think that stretch. I think that crosses boundaries no matter where you should. I mean, kids should be raised correct, in a good way.
Like there are people,
left or right.
There are
like,
people who are raised in a very positive environment who still do negative things, and there are people who were raised in very negative environments that still do positive things. But I think that the raising in and of itself is a very important thing to look at. I think the people you look at that do things in spite of their raising are not the norm, if that's fair.
Oh yeah, I think they're the exception. But I think the one thing to I'm a parent. I think I'm the only parent, and I know I'm the only parent here. But it's a part of that. Just to kind of tie into what you were saying is
do you?
okay, but my kids have been raised.
Any children?
My kids have been raised basically the same way. I have 3, about almost 4. They have drastically different personalities. Like the whole idea that humans are a blank slate is, I think, incorrect. I don't think
I would
that's.
agree.
So I mean, yeah, there are some situations where the parent, no matter what they does, is just they're in a bad situation where they're not going to be able to fix. But you should do whatever you can as a parent to put that child on the right path. Is I think what he's getting at.
You're a guide as a parent.
Exactly. Yes. I agree. That doesn't really tie in very much, but it's good to get that
No,
across.
I think that's very much tied. I think on a human level, we'll actually get into that a lot more.
Oh, I'm sure we will.
Especially if we talk about particular instances. I think that's very important.
The reason I believe this so strongly is because I believe that a child can be raised to be perfect. And I think I know.
Wow, we both cringed at that.
I agree. I wouldn't blame you, but
and why do you think that, Payne?
Well, because like I said, I've been observing people. I observe everyone, and it's not like I'm some master at it. I'm just consciously aware of what's going on around me, and so I've kind of seen it, and I think that if it's possible, I think it's something that should be aimed at. And I think
it should definitely be strived towards, but
right.
Is it possible? Really?
It is possible.
Okay.
I'm not like perfect in a way. When you're perfect, you're not without your needs because you need people around you. That's what makes you socially perfect. Now there's perfect and there's socially perfect for me. Perfect is like regular perfect. You don't need anybody because you're perfect. If you're perfect, you can have anybody.
Yeah.
If you're socially perfect, you need people around you. If you need people around you, other people around you like you. There's,
I mean, think so.
Okay, okay. Well, what I'm trying to get at here, if you're perfect by yourself, you don't need anybody because you're perfect. Now, but if you're socially perfect, you need the people around you. That's what makes the people around you like you.
I think what you're getting at is the idea of a synopsis might be the wrong word. A synthesis. Synthesis is what I'm looking for of the individual and the society as a whole coming together. So the true perfect would be someone who can function by themselves but chooses to function in society.
No.
If I may,
okay.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to cut you down.
Fine. If I'm wrong, go ahead.
I think if I may put a idea here, I don't think that's what he's getting at.
Go ahead.
I think he's approaching it from maybe an idea that I think maybe both of us have considered. I've considered it at least vaguely.
Please try to. I'm a little confused here.
There's this idea of the individualistic, perfect person. The person who can survive solely off their own ability, but also, in a greater scale, there is the person who can function perfectly within society. And what I think Payne is doing is presenting those as different, separate entities, which I think on some level is fair. However, I don't think that the person who exists perfectly in and of themselves, given what we know of human society, exists as perfectly as the person who exists perfectly within society. Because we know, as humans, as a social animal, to break it down to the most basic terms, we learn things from other people. We learn what other people, we build upon what other people think. And I feel like it's very possible as an individual, and I think this is a valuable input. I think this is really a valuable viewpoint and something that a lot of people think. And in some ways, and in particular in some interpretations, I think it's one of the major problems with society, honestly. I think you brought up a very good point, is that some people view the world as, how can I do my best personally within this? And they only view it on a personal level. And they only view it on an egoist level. And they only try to strive towards what is best for them, as opposed to what is best.
Okay, so sort of an objectivism kind of thing.
It's a self-created objectivism.
Okay, real quick, I want to see if I can. I think I get what you're saying. I want to see. I'm gonna try one more time to sum this up.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so
I think you broke down Western philosophy into two halves very succinctly.
So, I think again, I'm going to go for a synthesis here.
Okay.
So I'm going to create a hierarchy of good here. Okay. I'm going to start at the lowest level, and I'm going to work my way to the top of the hierarchy.
What is this hierarchy based on?
Is
it just if it's wholly
what is
personal?
good?
I'm not going to ask you questions about it. If it is,
what is philosophy?
No, that's a whole. But are you basing this on something, or is this a personal?
No, this is purely just assume good to be a thing.
Okay, so it's a personal basis.
Yeah, and I guess it would be.
For you, it's personal.
It might be fleshed out.
It may have influence.
It might be fleshed out in the hierarchy, but and just assume that good is a thing that we all understand.
Okay.
Just purely for this. I'm not saying it is. Just purely for this example.
Okay.
So, towards the bottom of this hierarchy, we have what is good for me right this second. Okay. Then a step up would be what is. Actually, real quick, I want to sidebar. These ideas are not my own. I'm bringing in multiple sources into my argument. So I don't think of me as some great thinker who's coming up with this. I'm not.
If I may, I don't think you have to even put that forward. I appreciate that you did, but I don't think you do. Everyone who has thoughts about anything and has considered it to any viewpoint in our current era has looked up people that believe the same thing, and those viewpoints have influenced them. No viewpoint is free of influence.
Yeah, I agree. I just didn't want someone to be like, I just didn't want the idea to be out there like, oh, he's plagiarizing this. This is clearly stated by someone else.
Okay,
so I just want to throw that out there for that. Okay, so at the very bottom we have what is good for me right now in the moment. A step up from that would be what is good for me both right now and future me. A step up from that would be what is good for both me and my family here and in the future. Then we step that up to community. Then we step that up to maybe state, nation, take it up until we get to basically humanity as a whole. Are you saying, I think what you're getting at is the perfect person would be the person who says and executes upon what he thinks is both the best for him and everybody up the ladder all the way up to humanity.
Well, the way I view it is, and I think the way that's right, and this is my view, so you have social groups, and the broadest group that you guys are bringing up is the state and the community.
I think humanity in general.
Okay, fine. Yeah, okay. But we all have multiple groups that we interact in. And the main, if you want to be successful in those groups socially, and if you want to rise to the top of the hierarchy, in my opinion, you would, first of all, go with the group's purpose. And so the group's purpose is, if it's a football team, it's to win games. So you do well in practice, and you do your job, right?
Striving towards the common good.
Exactly. Yes. And so when you do that, as well as act in a manner that is acceptable to the group, and you represent your personality accurately, and maybe you have a bit of humor or a bit of, just like if you're likable, right? And I think everybody will be likable.
So the Ubermensch is what you're getting at.
So I think that
Boy Nation.
I mean, if you act in a way that that's outside of the social norm, or if you dishonestly represent your personality, then people won't like you. But I think, and I think people dishonestly represent their personality, seeking good external stimulation, because it's an impulsive way of perceiving yourself.
It's the bottom of the hierarchy. It's what's good for me right now. I'm going to get that boy from.
It's like if you're not a comedian and but you tell a knock-knock joke. You know, like...
Do you think that society influences what a person's view
Oh, of
on
course.
what the individual perfectness in this case is?
Well, yeah, because the group always has this... it has this thing floating above it that everyone follows. Right. It's kind of it's abstract and
It's an ideal.
right. Yeah. And so everyone's following it. And I think that as long as everybody else follows it, and that's in my opinion the social norm. So
Okay, I already have a problem with what you're getting at. And
Okay.
I think this will lead fairly well into a good starting conversation, which is, so are you saying the good is dictated by society as a whole?
yes.
Okay.
How do you mean that?
So let's look at Nazi Germany.
Okay.
Hold up.
Go
Before
ahead. Go ahead.
before we get into Nazi
Before I
Germany,
strawman the shit out of it.
do you think what exactly do you mean by good is dictated by society as a whole? Because I think that's a very important question, and I think that is something that, as Brandon just said, does get strawmanned all to hell when you try to present it.
Well, I don't think there's a straw man as much as where does society start and end. If he starts with the state, then Nazi Germany could technically be working for the societal good.
I think,
In a twisted sense. I'm not saying they're correct by any means, but I'm saying it could be very easily perceived that way.
Is this a point, and I may, if I can put this forward, I think this is a point where we ask Payne what he's coming from, and I think both of us need to express where we think good comes from.
I think
for this.
so. Let's go ahead.
All right, Payne.
Ball's in your court.
Okay, can you restate the question to me?
Where does good come from, Payne?
That's pretty broad, Devin.
It's
Okay, I'm
very
going to try to
philosophical.
simplify
Yeah,
it
I
just
mean,
slightly.
like I
Is-
said, I've only the only thing I'm getting this from, and I'm being honest, is from observing in social interaction from groups that are younger, in high school, if I may.
And what would you say that social interaction is the full extent of society, or do you think there's more to society than the interpersonal
Wait,
interaction?
real quick, I think we're going to get sidebarred a little bit if we do it that way. I want to try to simplify it and let's see
Okay.
if you agree.
Fair enough.
Let's take this to its basic black and white, which I don't think is unfair in this specific situation, which is good objective or subjective? Is that a fair way to phrase this?
It's a very
It's black and white, but I think
it is very black and white, and it's
but I
a
think-
very dangerous way to express it. I think to someone who's not fully.
But I think eventually
decided
this is
that
what we're going to
yet?
get to eventually. I think if we
We
go
will
down the rabbit
definitely
hole.
get to it.
No, I'm saying in this specific conversation. I think if we actually take it to its
I think
extent, we're
it's-
going to get to this.
I
this
think
very
it's fair
question.
to bring up right now. I do have some potential discussions depending on how this goes, because it is it's a heavy and multifaceted question.
Yes, I know it is. It's not an easy question.
So, Payne.
Okay, so one of my jobs on this podcast is to make sure we all define terms and we all define what we're saying. That way we're on the same page and we're going towards the same. We're all talking about the same thing, and that way we're not misleading everybody and each other. So, Brandon, subjective and objective. So, what's the difference, and how do I
In terms
answer?
of the good?
Right. Yes.
Okay, so is there universally, no matter what time or place you exist in, a good? Or is good dependent on where and when you exist as a person? So is good for me, is morally good for me the same as morally good for a person living 2,000 years ago in Rome? That's what I'm getting at.
Okay.
Or is it dependent upon where and when you are?
I think it depends on where you're coming from. So if you're wanting it to be, if you want to go with the good that the group is going with, and make sure that you are socially accepted, then you would go with whatever it is, whatever's aiming at, whatever the whole group is aiming at. And so if you do that, and you are also likable and representing yourself honestly and accurately, then you would be rewarded, and you would be very successful and just very accepted. But if you were to see a good that was, if what the group was aiming at was bad, and you knew that, then and if you knew that, and if you had the courage and the opportunity to go against it, you would, and if you did, you would not be socially accepted. So you would have to have, numbers, willpower, and all of those sorts of things to go against it, because you will not be socially accepted within the group if you are not going at what the group is aiming at. And from what I've seen, and this is just from me observing in purely social interaction, nothing but, I mean, just honestly here, just a couple football games. That's all I look at. I know it's stupid, and I know it's probably not tied to it.
It's real life. That's
right.
From real life examples.
And that's.
But I think the problem. Are you saying that good comes from being socially accepted, or is there a good on top of that?
I think when you're socially accepted, you go to the top of the hierarchy, or you rise to within it.
So is good rising to the top of the hierarchy?
I think it is good to rise to the top of the hierarchy, but I don't know if what the hierarchy is aiming at is good in itself. That's what you have to judge.
So is it good to rise to the top of a hierarchy that's aiming at bad?
That's a difficult question. I think.
Okay, well, so I think the problem we're kind of coming across is I do believe in an objective good. I think there are. First of all, let's. Even though I am a Christian, I do believe in God. Let's take God completely out of it. I think there are things that can be rationally come to, and that can be discovered in a rational way, I guess would be the right way to phrase it. Even if you're living on an island completely devoid of civilization, completely devoid of outside influence. So, for instance, the right to life. Again, I think it all comes down to, once again, the founding principles of the United States: life, liberty, property, / pursuit of happiness. I think those are objective moral goods, no matter where you are, no matter what time you live in. So, I think taking another life is objectively bad, unless it's self-defense in which you're preserving life as opposed to them taking it.
I would say the action of taking another life is still objectively bad in that case. It's just a specific case where the good outweighs the bad.
Possibly, but I think they've given up their right to life by transgressing against life itself.
I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that, although I think that's a very nuanced viewpoint.
It is, and I think that. So, but to keep it simple for this is there are certain basic ideas of what is right and wrong, no matter what society you live in.
Right.
And I think there are levels that build upon that only exist in certain societies. But even then, those are still objectively good. But just to keep it simple, I think there is a very basic objective good and evil in the world. So, again, I don't. It is a bit of a straw man, but I don't think it is at the same time. Nazi Germany, society at large, was very ethnocentric. Okay. So, to rise to the top of the society in that case would be becoming a member of the SS, or becoming a high-ranking member of the Nazi Party. That would be rising up the hierarchy. I think that's still objectively bad, even though you're rising to the top of the hierarchy.
But let's say you did that in an attempt to subvert the Nazi hierarchy. Would that be wrong, or would that be right?
It would depend on what you did to get there. I think that's what it comes down to.
It would be very much your do.
That's very nuanced.
Regardless, it is you are doing wrong to do right in the grand scale. At least
I think in general the idea that the ends outweigh the means, or the ends justify the means, is inherently wrong.
I think
there are very specific,
on
very
the ends and the means that are being presented.
I think there are very, very specific circumstances where perhaps you're right, but as of like 99.9% of cases, no, the methods do not outweigh, or I'm sorry, the ends do not outweigh the means in which you got to those ends. It would be very specific circumstances where I would disagree with that. Okay, so go. I mean, does that answer your question? I mean, or does that?
Well, in Nazi Germany, when you're complying with the goal that the group is aiming at, and you rise to the top of the hierarchy, or you're at least in the hierarchy, and going up in it, then you are socially accepted. And so you are doing well for yourself at the moment. But the main goal that you are complying with is objectively bad. And so that's my viewpoint on that.
Counterintuitive to humanity.
Okay. I don't think that necessarily goes against what I'm saying. Is that you're still in a bad hierarchy. Is it good to rise up that bad hierarchy? That's what I'm getting at.
It's good for yourself, but I don't think it's...
So is that an objective good? Or is... So what? So is good for yourself, or is good for humanity as a whole? Is there an objective good?
I think good, in and of itself, is good. The question is whether good for yourself. I think we need to separate this. Good is good. Good for yourself is good for yourself. Good for humanity is good for humanity. They are both good as far as the way we're looking at good.
Okay, but what if those things
we're getting to is whether one cancels the other out?
Oh, yes, exactly. What if those inherently conflict? What if there's an inherent
like whether being good for yourself is bad for humanity, or whether being good for humanity is bad for yourself. I think when you look at that objectively, in nearly every case, if you can look at something that is bad for yourself but good for humanity, it does outweigh it being bad for yourself, just because of the number of individuals that it influences.
I would agree. So, Payne, this goes back to you. I'm not trying to challenge you like on a, but you know what I'm getting at here.
Yeah.
So, is rising to the top of a hierarchy good in and of itself?
Well, I mean, obviously it depends on what situation you're looking at. I think if there's one purpose that the whole hierarchy is aiming at that is objectively bad, and you know it's bad, then you should go against the hierarchy. Now, if you go against the hierarchy, you are not socially accepted, and you are at the bottom of it by default. Or you're just completely cast out of it, and you could be in danger. But that's not the point. If you are in sight of the bad that the hierarchy is causing, and you know it's morally wrong, then you should go against it. But, I mean, if it's just another situation, if it's something that the hierarchy isn't aiming at if the hierarchy is aiming at something that's not bad, and that is just a standard, simple hierarchy, and there's nothing exactly wrong with it, then I think it's best to comply with it. And I think it's best to go along with it and challenge yourself.
I think what you're saying is hierarchies inherently have value, and you should be very careful to go against the hierarchy.
Yes.
Okay, so but for your specific argument, I think we should cut out the middleman. I think we could all come to an agreement on it, which is, regardless of where the hierarchy stands, you should strive towards the good, even if, regardless of where the hierarchy is striving towards. Devin, would you disagree with that?
I would not disagree with that. I would potentially disagree with the idea that you should strive towards hierarchy when it's not. Well, of course
you're left. I'm not saying that. But
when it's not. I think you should question hierarchy at every level. Why does this hierarchy exist? If you can look at a hierarchy and explain why it exists in terms that make sense, that's fine. However, a hierarchy that exists in terms that do not make sense, a hierarchy that is based at some point upon force or manipulation should be questioned and should be
Corruption.
opposed.
I think corruption is probably. Would that be a fair?
Corruption. I would call what I described corruption.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
Yes.
A corrupted hierarchy is a problem, and a corrupted hierarchy, by virtue of it being corrupted, causes corruption in decision making within the hierarchy. So I think, in general, hierarchy should be questioned because you have to make absolutely sure that a hierarchy is not corrupt before you throw your full faith behind it. I don't think hierarchy should be followed just because it's hierarchy. I think hierarchy, in fact, should be questioned because it's hierarchy. And if you question hierarchy and you can't find fault in it, then fine. If you question hierarchy and you do find fault in it, but it provides a greater good than the alternative, then okay, work within that. It's a very nuanced situation. However, if you question a hierarchy, and even if the views that hierarchy puts out seem to be very positive, if the actual execution of that hierarchy is negative, then that hierarchy is not valid.
Okay, actually, I think this is a perfect segue into the next point, but this is Drunken Dialectics, so let's take another shot.
Dialectics.
So let's take a shot as we segue into where we're going. So, Payne, while me and Devin are getting ready to take a shot, why don't you plug in our sponsors?
Just FYI to the viewer, too young to drink, so while they take shots, I just kind of sit here and, in solitude, kind of, look at them and see how much fun they're having with their alcoholic beverages, and, just kind of miss out on all the fun times that really go on in this show.
Okay, I think that is once again, now that we're taking our shot, I think that's a good segue. So, hierarchy. Hierarchy. So, I think this is basically what separates the right and left. And I think they both have their place in society.
I think that's fair.
I think the right tends to see hierarchy as an inherent good.
I don't even think tends to. I think the right is very much pro-hierarchy. That is the...
Yes.
If you break down the, political compass of left and right and go into the more actual application, I think the right is very much more hierarchy and the left is less hierarchy.
Yes, I think this is the problem we have with the...
There are exceptions. I will say there are exceptions, but
I think that's a problem. I think that's a more accurate right-left thing as opposed to the political compass right-left. I think we all have problems with the political compass test.
Of course.
And I think that's my main problem with it, is the right-left dichotomy, which I don't think is correct on that specific test. I think the right-left dichotomy in real life would be the right sees hierarchy as an inherent good that keeps chaos at bay. The left sees hierarchy as a thing that tends to become corrupt over time, and therefore we need to ensure that...
I would argue... now go ahead with your sentence. I don't mean to get
Well, I would say that, therefore, to the extremes of the left would be... So let's look at the extremes of both sides just to paint a clear picture. The extreme right would be, look, we need hierarchy, therefore no matter what hierarchy exists, what hierarchy pre-exists to this point, we have to keep it in place.
because
otherwise,
it's important.
Because it is important. The extreme left would be, look, this hierarchy is putting some people lower than others, therefore just fuck hierarchy in general. It's the extremes.
No, I disagree. You didn't go far enough with the left.
Okay,
The
please.
far left would be the breakdown of hierarchy in and of itself.
Yes.
Is invalid.
Mm-hmm. And
I don't agree with that.
Mm.
And I personally don't think anyone succinctly and permanently ever agrees with that.
The problem is they're arguing for it. I see a lot of
they
arguments
absolutely do argue for it. I think, however, the problem is that it is a temporary evolution in an ideology. When you see hierarchy being a problem, the immediate reaction is to knee-jerk and say hierarchy doesn't need to exist at all.
Yes. I think that's what's happening now. Whether
And then
I don't know if it's in here.
I disagree. But the problem you reach is...
Well, we're talking about extremes.
Yeah, of course, with extremes. You say hierarchy shouldn't exist. And then you realize that for anything to function above a basic level, it does need a basic form of hierarchy. And then you have to start asking questions about how you form an ethical hierarchy on the left. And that, I think, is why I'm not even going to say moderate.
Okay.
The considerate left, not considerate as far as... I'm going to assume people know what I mean because I'll explain.
Not emotionally considerate, but thoughtfully considerate.
Both, but...
Okay, fair enough.
I think both play a part. I think emotional consideration is important,
but not purely emotional.
And not purely. Again,
the thoughtful left.
I think honestly, at the end, if I may, at the end of this podcast, I think a valuable thing to do would be to go around and say what we think the influence of emotion is on thought in general. Because I think that is the second half of human thought. If that's we've covered logical up until now, but at the very end, I think we should cover that. But anyway, what I'm getting at is the left, and if you are on the right, I would say don't discredit what I'm saying. Consider that there are knee-jerk right reactions as well. You react to something that viscerally influences you in a negative direction. You see hierarchy that is corrupted and horrible. You think, fuck hierarchy. Hierarchy should not exist. You see chaos that is causing people to die in the streets, and you think, we need control of this. It's the first step. In my opinion, the people who actually... And this is a little extreme. The position I'm taking on this is a little maybe unfair. If you have disagreements with it, tell me. But I think the people who actually full-heartedly believe in a cause, at some point, their first level of understanding what they believe is that visceral reaction. You have people on the left who rebel hard against hierarchy. You have people on the right who argue that chaos is enveloping the world and it's going to cause us all to die horribly. And you have people who either rebel wholly against hierarchy, or you have people who buckle down and fully support hierarchy and control. And it's understandable, I think. But anyone who's considered it for any amount of time understands it's a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
The hard reaction is the first thing that leads you on a viewpoint, and that's fine. I am not saying people should not have a knee-jerk reaction. I'm saying that it is important to realize that a knee-jerk reaction is your first response, and that your first response is not the thing that your whole politics comes from. Your first response is maybe the basis, but first responses are very, very rarely nuanced and very, very rarely researched. So I think it's very important to acknowledge your first response. Acknowledge what you feel when you hear something. And then do your research. Do your research, look into things, understand things, learn things. By all fucking means, learn things, consider things, and understand things before you form a solid viewpoint. And there are a lot of people who may end up on the complete opposite of what they thought they believed at first from the knee-jerk response. And there are a lot of people, honestly, if I may say, and if I'm wrong, tell me, but like myself, and to some extent like Brandon, who had a knee-jerk response, and who built upon that response, and they don't necessarily disagree wholeheartedly with what they initially believed, but they have built nuance and understanding and reason behind what they believe. They've included consideration into what they believe, and they have based their current viewpoint on a learning curve from that knee-jerk response. Do you think that's fair? Do you think?
No, I think that's fair. I think it's easy to excuse me. I think it's easy to succumb to the. I would say it's almost a chemical. Well, it's a chemical reaction. I mean, it's a serotonin release.
Initially,
yeah,
of course.
it's like, oh, this is bad. I think it's bad. Therefore,
Science has told us very valuable things about this topic.
Yes, I get a good feeling by thinking that this is bad, and that leads me to doubling down on it. I think it's very easy to get caught in that trap.
Right.
But if you take it, if you realize what you're doing and you realize it is a knee-jerk reaction, I think it's a very valuable thing to build from. I think it is the knee-jerk reaction is very much the building block that you build upon.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Quick. I have an idea of what the most important particular facet of being an informed human being is. Mm-hmm. And that's possibly the most obnoxious thing I've ever said in my entire life.
No, I get what you're saying. Go ahead.
But I think... Am I picking up on it?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. I think the most important thing for being a thinking human being is self-awareness.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And I think a lot of these knee-jerk reactions come before that. And that's fair. Because self-awareness, as much as people who come to understand it may put it forward as this is the basic level, it's not. It is the basic level, I think. But it's not necessarily the first thing you come to understand. You may come to understand some hierarchies are really fucked up. Or you may come to understand, hey, some people really fuck up when they don't have order on either way. But the most important thing is to realize yourself in that. Are you the type of person who leans toward hierarchy? Are you the type of person that leans towards order? Why?
Okay, actually, I think this is important. So let's narrow.
Okay.
Let's bring in the
By all
extremes.
means.
So let's look more towards the center of right and left. I think what it essentially comes down to is the right, me very much especially, sees hierarchy as, look, especially in the United States where things are going pretty freaking well, considering I think if you look at the entire world, I mean, come on, I don't think you'd argue with that. Things are going pretty well. Things could be better. I wouldn't argue with that.
Okay, I started to say the argument is.
Take a person from the
argument
1920s
as a
anywhere,
whole-
put them in the United States today, they're in heaven. I mean, I don't think that's very much of an argument. I mean, come on.
It depends who from the 1920s, to be fair. But
Take the richest person, put them in the middle class today.
take the richest
Great
person from the
Gatsby?
1920s and put them in the middle class today,
Yeah.
they would
Caraway?
much rather be in the 1920s.
I think I'd completely disagree with that.
well,
We have so much stuff now. It's
after they
ridiculous.
can, no, the thing
That's
is,
fair.
after they consider it, and if you give them all the information, according to technology, yes, they're going to take the modern day because technology is fucking lit, my man.
Mm-hmm.
According to where they are on the social hierarchy and what they can afford according to the, effects of their time, the person who's rich in the 1920s is so far above the person who's middle class in the current time that if you break it down to just according to where they were, the person in the middle class is leagues ahead. Or the person who's rich in the 1920s is leagues ahead of the person in the middle class.
I think your Freudian
According
slip
to
was
their
correct.
time. Only according to their time. I'm not saying that the rich person in the 1920s is doing better off than the middle class person in the modern day. But I think technology is something that should be factored in independently. Because I do not think technology in and of itself has a political compass. Technology is technology. Technology is human development, and technology should not be used to steer the political compass.
Okay. So a couple things before we get into the point I'm trying to make.
Okay.
I think we'll get into this in a different podcast, which is I think you're looking at this from a couple different ways, which is I think first of all you're approaching it from a power angle, which is of course a 1% person in the 1920s would have more political or societal power. Yes. Okay. So power.
Right.
Okay, so let's look at it purely materially for the first part. So would you disagree that a person I would even say a poor person nowadays is much more materially stable than a person in the 1920s?
Is the art that's the thing.
Purely material.
This is even purely materialistically. This is a nuanced and age as far as year, not age as far as
yeah, I get you.
Age influenced question. Because a rich person in the 1920s is doing much better than anyone else in the 1920s. Whereas a middle class person.
Okay, but you're again looking at it from a power angle, I think.
Do you want me to approach it from a power angle?
No, I'm saying purely materially. Purely in terms of material wealth. The dollar value might not be the same, but what you get from that dollar value is much better nowadays. You have the poorest people have the poorest people have smartphones.
I actually, because of how technology works in a societal way, and this is not a hard, fast conversation. I'm not saying you're absolutely wrong. I think there are arguments to be made. I think this is a conversation that could very much be very closely looked at. But on a basic level, I think a person, what you have to look at in terms of human society and in terms of wealth in particular, and even particularly, no, it's not. It's not unfair to say because it's capitalist society. Okay. No, that's not to.
No, I get you. Go ahead.
Throw shade on capitalist society. At some point, I will air my positive influences of capitalist society, but if you look at it. A person in the 1920s who is in the top 1% versus a person in the modern age who is in the middle class. Now, Brandon, I do not mean this as an attack.
Go ahead.
But we have discussed that you do have to consider a historical context according to, as we have said, and the podcast doesn't know this, but God damn it, I promise we'll get into it. The historical context determines a lot of things, even on some levels what is right and wrong.
I disagree.
Or the levels to which something is right and wrong.
I would say the judgment of doing wrong is different.
No.
It's still just as wrong.
Okay, that's fair. I thought you were going a different angle. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
But I think if you cut technology out of the picture, because I think it's fair to say technology in some level or other would have advanced regardless of the economic system of the group.
At some level, yes.
Because you have, and shouts out to everyone present. I need to voice this right now before you all burn me alive. I don't think the Soviet Union was that cool.
Well,
but
we can agree on that.
They did do some pretty dope shit. They were the first to get some shit into space. That's pretty cool. Okay, dope.
How many cosmonauts did they leave?
It's really fucked up, and they killed a lot of people, and that's fucked up. And I'm not arguing that that's not fucked up. It's very fucked up.
Well, okay, this is one of my jobs. Let's not go off too much. I'm gonna stop us here.
Okay,
Brandon was talking about. reason is
hit me.
because we were talking about the 1920s and rich people, and the rich and the differences
okay.
for a while now.
You kinda
And
say the
Brandon's
same
main
thing.
point was that today we're doing a lot better than what we were. It's never been better than it was, and that's what his point was. And so I want to go off on that. So let's try to narrow it down. And
So we're focusing.
Okay, so
I'm sorry for veering off.
I want to take the nuance out of your conversation.
Okay, hit me with
let's go
what your nuance-free version is, because I'm
Okay,
interested.
so don't worry about technical. I'm not saying technology wouldn't progress if we were a fucking socialist.
Assuming, and this is a very hard and fast thing to throw out, but assuming technology advances,
the advancement of technology was my second point, which we didn't get to, which would have covered what we were saying.
We may, but
we will.
But for this, assuming technology advances the same way it did.
Okay, perfect. That works for my argument. Is it not better materially for a poor person now than it was for a rich person in the 1920s? Purely material.
For a poor
assuming
person
technology.
now than a rich person later.
Yes.
Okay, for a poor person now, as opposed to a rich person.
I'm not saying
in the
homeless.
1920s.
I'm saying like the bottom 10% who still have housing, who are basically
who live
guaranteed.
in trailers.
I would take a trailer.
Or apartments.
I would take
cheap apartments.
Okay, fine. Yes.
The bottom half of American society, and that is not that's not an attack on the bottom half of American society. I've
Trust
lived
me, he's
in
not
both
going to
of
attack
those
you
things.
guys.
But what I'm getting at is, I would say, in terms, on several terms.
I think you think I'm trying to trap you. I'm really
No, I know you're not trying to trap me, Brandon. If you were trying to trap me, I would be a lot more obnoxious, I promise, because I'm used to that at this point.
Just making sure.
No, I know you're not trying to trap me. I know you're trying to have a civil conversation. What I'm trying to get at is, I still disagree. I think that in terms of, as Payne said, societal influence, in terms of societal happiness, I think
you're ignoring. Once again.
Okay,
the
what am I?
material.
Tell me what the issue is, and I'll address it. I'm sorry if I'm missing something.
No, I see where you're getting at, and I agree. Like in terms of happiness, in terms of we are at probably an all-time deficit. It's not good in terms of purpose and happiness in today's society, no matter what class you're in.
I think you may be taking me a little too far, but go ahead.
Maybe, but what I'm trying to get at is I'm saying purely material, purely what you have in your house, in your apartment.
But without technology being...
Okay, once again.
Sans technology is the very important
No, I'm not
part
saying
here.
sans technology. I'm saying assuming technology advances no matter what society you're in. I'm saying what you have today, no matter what class you're in, excluding the homeless,
The homeless are important.
Of course they are, but I mean, they kind of are the exception to this.
Okay.
Go
ahead.
Homeless, no matter where you are, you're kind of fucked, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
fair.
We'll disagree.
If you don't have a house, you're fucked. That's
we disagree.
Kind of universal.
We disagree on why, but that is true. You're not in a good position, no matter what time you live in. I'm saying purely material.
Okay.
You're better off now than at any point in history. No matter what class you're in.
I'm going to approach this from 3 very quick, I promise you, Payne, don't kill me, angles. Okay, firstly, before I go into this, we have to assert.
I'll cut that.
I think this
Don't leave it
is Drunken Dialectics, my man. Drunken Dialectics.
Drunken Dialectics.
I think it's important to consider. Firstly, and I do need to stress this, what we're talking about is, and I really don't think, and this is not an attack,
No, it's fine.
this is a consideration for your question. If we assume technology advances regardless, the effects are very different. Technology is something that a lot of people have associated, and this is not this particularly, this part is not focused on you. This is something that I notice a lot in online studies and online interactions, is a lot of people assume that technological advancement is tied in particular to an economical viewpoint, or in some cases even a philosophical viewpoint.
I think that's correct, but that's not my
But-
argument. Is my problem.
Okay, that's what I'm getting at. That's not what we're talking about right now.
Okay.
Is that left or right, even in this case, it hurts me physically, I promise.
Okay.
Up or down, we are talking about a society where technology advances regardless of viewpoint. Right. Fair?
Yes.
Left or right, up or down.
Yes.
In that society, I think, in the first place, it's fair to say that and this is the first point of those 3 points I mentioned earlier, in a society where technology advances, the rich will always be above the people below them, because they have access by virtue of being rich, and this is regardless of society, unless the society deprives them of being rich. If you are able to have more access to the technological advancements of an age, you're going to have more access to the technological advancements of an age. That's just how it works. I think that's fair.
Yeah, but again, you're taking a completely different argument. Okay. Let's just answer this simple question.
I may be misunderstanding, and I'm sorry.
It's okay. Okay, so answer this very simple question for me. Purely materially, as in terms of what you have. I don't even remember where we started this from.
No, I
don't either.
Okay.
And that's a problem.
Okay. A poor person in the 1920s.
No, I remember that part, but I don't remember
what you're putting forward. A poor person in the 1920s and a poor person of today. A poor person of today.
A rich person in the 1920s.
Yeah.
And a poor person.
A poor person today is doing better than a rich person in the 1920s.
Yes, purely materially. I'm not saying in comparison to other classes. I'm saying purely materially.
I would disagree. Still.
Really?
Because the thing is, okay.
Where would you rather live? That's what it comes down
Personally?
to. Yes.
That's not what it comes down to. And I think that is a portion of nuance that really needs to be addressed. I would rather live in the modern age because technology is fucking cool.
Okay.
What I'm getting at is...
Thank you. That's what I'm getting
in the terms of the era. And that is what we have to look at by the people who are living in that era. The people in the 1920s have access to the most modern technology. In that era, they do.
Yes.
There's no argument to be made.
Again, you're looking at it from a class angle. I'm not talking about.
I'm not trying to approach it from it. You gave it to. I'm sorry if it comes across. I really don't mean it.
It's fine.
As like an obnoxious argument from a class angle, but you did say the poor and the rich. That is a class angle that is being given to me, so that's the way I'm approaching it.
Because I'm trying to say the high point
if
of
you want to
society
say
in the
the poor
1920s
people and the poor people, or the rich people and the rich people, then that's fair. I'll approach it from a different angle.
Well, but the problem is, of course, a poor person in the 1920s is worse off than a poor person today, and a poor person or a rich person in the 1920s is worse off than a rich person today. That's obvious. Everybody knows that.
Fair. So we're cutting out the historical element with that. We've got at least one angle.
See, the problem is,
tell me what I'm
arguing
missing.
against something I'm not arguing.
What are you arguing? Tell me.
I'm arguing again, purely material. Okay.
Define material so we can.
Yeah, I feel like that's fair.
Okay, so
without
what you have,
context.
the things you have in your house, the things you're able to obtain through work or through
the shit you got,
the things you're able to. The things you both have and are able to obtain through your means. Okay? Things.
Without historical context.
I'm not comparing different classes.
We are purely material.
Purely material.
And we understand why going purely material doesn't really give one side or another an argument.
It did in the beginning, but I don't remember what the original
Okay,
argument
I'll go
was.
purely material.
Okay.
Yes, a rich person in the modern age has more than a rich person in the 1920s. Yes, a poor person in the modern age probably has more than a rich person in the 1920s. However, I don't think that really says anything.
Okay, we
I
both. I don't think material is the ends either. That's not what I was trying to get at. I was
We-
trying to settle a very basic point here.
No, I'm sorry. I may have took this much more deeply than
I think
it
you thought I was
needed to
arguing
be.
something I wasn't.
That may have been the case. I didn't fully understand. Yes,
I'm very
the
much
modern-
not a
the people in the
materialist,
modern
so-
age, regardless of class, are better off than people in the previous age, regardless of class.
Okay, perfect. So I think the problem is we were both arguing against the straw man of each other. That I think
and
so.
I think it's fair for anybody who might be listening to this. They were both arguing against strawmen that have been presented. They are not
Yes.
illusory strawmen. They are strawmen that are regularly presented in the
I think
left
this is a
versus
good-
right dichotomy.
This is a good thing to bring up about our podcast. Straw man, steel man.
Right.
Yes.
So
of course, absolutely.
So straw man is you take the weakest point of your
you
versus
argue
yeah.
against the weakest
Right.
possible
or
argument.
even
So-
in some cases, the weakest interpretation.
Yeah, I think
right.
that's-
Yeah.
yes, that's
So we're trying to steer away from that. That's
Yes.
kind of what we're
correct.
aiming
and
at.
we might fail. Like I think
Interpretation is important, though, kids.
Well, okay, kind of, but and we might feel like I think we just kind of messed up there. We'll keep it in just so we can learn from it, and you can see that we're actually being sincere about this. We are going to mess up
Trying
every
our
once in a while.
best.
We are, but okay. So I think we need to make sure we're trying to steelman each other because I think that whole thing could have been avoided, and we do. I think hopefully you learned something from that extended conversation. I'm sure you could have if you want to, but so. I was just trying to establish a very basic idea, which is no matter where you are today, materially, it is better than where things were 80, 100 years ago. Okay.
And we may disagree on why that is.
I think
but
we do disagree
I
on why.
but I think
But-
the reality of the situation is kind of something you can't argue
Okay,
against.
perfect. That's what I was trying to get. Okay, perfect. So, my thing is,
I have an iPhone.
exactly.
People who were poor in the 1920s had tuberculosis.
Yes, that's
Very
yes.
different.
Very. Okay. So, but I was gonna. Okay, so this ties. So let's take it a step further. So this is where we're actually going to disagree. I don't
Okay.
think technology progresses at the same rate, regardless of economic or societal ideas. I think that there's a reason people come to the United States for healthcare, even though we all live in the same world in the same time. There's a reason that we make advancements that other nations don't make, and I think that in large part comes down to our ideals and our economic policies.
I think there are a couple things to consider there. I think considering that people, and I'm just going to be straightforward with you. I think it's important to state rich people, people with money, come to the U.S. for particular operations because they know that the most skilled doctors for those particular operations are in the U.S. I think
Yes.
that's fair. I think they do that. I'm not arguing that they do that. However, I think it's important and honestly kind of counterpoint to consider that people do travel outside of the U.S. for lesser operations because they are way cheaper outside of the U.S.
Okay, I think we should diverge here because you want to talk about it. But real quick, we will get into this. Actually, I don't want to argue because I don't want to drag it out. But I do have arguments against that.
Okay.
But let's go into real quick because we're running out of time.
People on either side that do both things.
I'm sure. I think probably next time we will get into an in-depth capitalism argument, and in terms of pro and against. I think that's probably a good place to go from here. So, but you want to get into the place emotions have in our.
Okay, yeah.
So let's do that. We're running out. We're kind of running low on time. So let's go ahead and do
That's
that.
important for basis. Do you want me to start that?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Do we want to take a shot before we do that one, or
I think we have enough left for both of us to have a shot. So let's give it a try.
Let's try that. Or at least have a
No,
shot.
we are dry. So
Well,
there's a reason why we were canceling
It's a
fairly
damn
early
shame.
tonight.
Okay, so
Go ahead.
I think emotions are regardless of the political basis that this word may have, emotions are valid. Human emotions are a valid part of human existence. Human emotions, in my opinion, are unconscious thought. And I feel like the breakdown of emotions versus thought is unfair because of that. Emotions are thought. They are just immediate thought, unconscious thought, rather than considerate thought. However, I think it's very important to realize that a lot of the systems, a lot of the ideas, a lot of the groupings we have in human society are at some point based on emotion. You don't have, except for in the case of sociopaths, people who have thought completely free of emotion. Emotion is not without value. Emotion does have value. That's not to say that emotion should be the only thing you pay attention to. That's not to say that you should not exercise control over your emotions or try to do so. However, I do think the idea that emotions play no part in human consideration is unfair. I do think the idea that emotions play no part in human consideration is heavily skewed towards trying to prove a particular viewpoint. I think that emotions and logic both play a key part in human understanding. We should consider both. And when we consider emotions, the thing that causes us to think is, I feel this way. Why do I feel this way? That's a very important part of human ideas. And I think cutting emotions wholesale out of that as just excess functions of the human mind that don't tie into logic is A, counterproductive, and B, probably influenced from sources that, if I may, there are sources that lean against human emotion, that lean against emotion in general, and there are ideologies that focus on the purely logical ideas of a construct and assert that those ideas cannot be challenged because they are logical when they are ideas that deal with a species that does not function wholly on logic.
Okay, I get what you're saying, and I agree in a large part. I think the idea that you're getting at, or the idea that you're arguing against, is in some ways a straw man. I don't know anybody on the right. There might be extremes, but I don't know anybody on the right who says that emotions have no part to play.
Okay, if I can
go ahead,
take my moment to shit on the one individual I always shit on.
Go ahead.
And not necessarily just him, but in particular the people who agree with his ideology and push his ideology to its furthest points. When you say facts don't care about your feelings, you have to also consider A, that is objectively correct, because facts don't feel anything because they are facts. And B, that the assertion there is that feelings, and by virtue of their synonymousness, that's probably not a word, feelings and emotions always should basically be on a second level compared to facts. And on some level, I understand where they're coming from on that. However, the importance of emotion, the importance of human identity, the importance of feelings heavily influences perspective. And I think anyone who argues against the fact that human perspective is probably the most important part of an argument among humans is missing something.
Okay, I get where you're coming from.
Okay.
Perspective does play a role, but there has to be something either, I don't know if underneath or on top of it is correct. I'm not sure. I'll have to actually think about how to phrase this. But there has to be more to it. So perspective can be...
I'm not arguing that perspective is the be-all, end-all. I'm arguing that a set stack of information. Information that was recorded by humans from a particular perspective. And in some cases, very, very obviously from a particular perspective, should not be considered without perspective. You should consider it free of bias. However, you should also consider that bias, and this is something that really doesn't get stressed enough, every single study you have ever seen in your entire life has some level of bias on it. That is the first thing they teach you in a statistics course, is that no study is free of bias. That's not to say that statistics are useless. Absolutely not. Statistics are very, very useful to understanding, how we live and how society works and how the universe works and how everything works. Statistics are useful. However, the presentation, and I promise this ties in, the presentation of statistics as a be-all, end-all in the modern era is, I feel, very disingenuous. When you present a number with a % sign after it, there are a lot of people who take that as, well, they did the study. They studied people, so that's right. That's not the case. That's absolutely not the case. Now, should you consider that? Absolutely. That's important. It's a study that was done.
I think it's important to look at how the study was done. I think the people who do the
Yes,
study
I completely
should
agree.
leak out how they performed the study.
Right, of course.
Like every detail, in my opinion. But
See,
that's
I think you're. I have to say I know who you're talking about, and I don't think that's what he's saying.
I have no problem with expressing who I'm talking about.
Oh, I mean,
My boy Benny. But
yeah, Bench. I'm a huge fan. I think he's correct in most situations.
my
Almost
thing
everything.
is, and I have actually, I've been looking more, because you suggested I did, and I have. And I've looked more into Ben Shapiro, and I've looked more into Jordan Peterson. And while there are particular aspects of Jordan Peterson that I can look at and be like, okay, all right, this is all right. Particularly his self-help stuff, his basic psychological stuff, his this is how you lead a better life type of things. I see some very positive information there. I can see where he's coming from with that. I disagree with him on several things, and I do think he is dangerously wrong on several things. However, I can at least look at his viewpoint and go, okay, I understand where he's coming from. Whereas Ben Shapiro comes across to me, and again, maybe I'm just biased. I am a leftist. I'm not coming at him with this understanding that maybe he's going to drop some absolute truth on me. It's more that maybe he'll say something I don't think is absolutely stupid. But I look at Ben Shapiro, and Ben Shapiro, first and foremost, is not a debater. Ben Shapiro, I don't think, in anything I've seen of him, has ever argued logically a viewpoint. No, I agree. I'm not saying he's never argued logically. I'm saying he has never argued succinctly and logically a viewpoint that absolutely pins down what he's saying. I think that Ben Shapiro takes what has been presented as an absolute, fully supports that absolute, and then presents it as an absolute. I think there are a lot of cases you can look at Ben Shapiro where he says things and he's like, well, that's just the way it is. And I'm going to be honest with you, anyone who ever presents something as this is the way it is, without a succinct, and I'm going to be honest, this is not to get overly scholarly with it, but you can't present something as this is just the way that it is. Even if you try to base yourself on something like, in many cases, Ben Shapiro bases his argument, and I know this is a very narrow perspective on him, I guess, but biology.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Ben Shapiro argues on the basis of biology, except for the argument he's involved in is not a biological argument. It is an argument of identity, which has biological influences, certainly, but is not wholly biological.
Remember, we are trying to get to the bottom of emotion.
This is very...
No, I think this...
Yeah,
I think
okay,
this
right,
ties-
okay.
We're steering into it. But Ben Shapiro in particular, and we may get more into Ben Shapiro, and I will fully be happy to get more into Ben Shapiro. Thank you, Payne, for steering me off of that viewpoint. But I think...
No, I think that's actually the viewpoint we need to get into.
I think Ben Shapiro in particular, though, somewhat himself, but more so the people who support him, push a particular ideal that once they are given an objective, that is the point to push. And that if anyone argues against, and that, I'm going to be honest, that is the problem I have with objective truth. That objective truth, as such, I don't feel exists. I feel like pseudo-objective truth, or objective truth in parentheses, if you prefer, does exist. And that is truth that cannot be argued against in any capacity in nature with which to disprove it. If you can argue against something from every available angle and you still can't fully disprove it, okay, fine. That's fine. However, when you come at an argument based on objective truth, you're not coming at an argument honestly, I don't feel like. I feel like you have to approach, even if you believe in objective truth, you have to approach an argument subjectively and then prove your point subjectively. Because if you can't prove something subjectively, it has no business being objective.
Okay, perfect. This is actually going to wrap it up. I don't think... Okay, so real quick, to say you can prove something subjectively is, I think, an inherent contradiction. If you're proving it subjectively, then to another person it's subjectively wrong, even if to another person it's subjectively correct. So I think that's an inherent problem.
I disagree. I think subjectivism is treated a little loosely a lot of times. Mm-hmm. I think subjectivism is not everybody sees this a different way. That is the basis of it, yes. Mm-hmm. Everyone does see things a different way. However, when everyone sees things a different way, and yet you have people agreeing on certain characteristics of things, those things are what you can consider generally agreed upon. Society as a whole, humanity as a whole recognizes them as this is the case. That's what I mean by quotation marks objectively.
Okay.
When I say objectively with quotation marks or pseudo-objectively, I mean that it is not something that is cosmically subjective. Objective. It is not absolute objective. It is something that we have not been able to argue out of existence. And I think that's the point of logic, is things that can be argued out of existence don't exist. Because if you can make an argument that can't really be assailed or argued against, the thing probably doesn't exist. Do you think that's fair?
I think I would disagree, but I get where you're coming from. So that's actually, I think that's probably where we'll take it up next time, is objective versus objective. In terms of morals, good, truth, that's probably a good place to start for our second podcast. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed. This is kind of giving you a bit of a taste of what we're going to be doing here. It's
Drunken Dialectics.
We'll probably be even drunker next time. So, so
big drunk energy.
So we're just going to be talking and having a good time, getting drunk. Hopefully you'll join us. This has been Brandon.
Devin.
Payne.
And once again, hope you've enjoyed. Please tune in next time.